Hello, I'm Ollie and this is Criminolly, where I talk about crime, pulp, horror, that kind of thing. Today I want to talk to you about disturbing books and why people read them. So I put up a video about a week and a half ago about a particular disturbing book, Notice by Heather Lewis. And I've had a ton of comments on that video, and a number of people have asked the very simple question, why would you read a disturbing book? Why would you put yourself through that? And it was something that I wanted to have a bit of a chat about today, because I think it's a really, really good question. And the answer to it is not at all obvious. I don't claim to have all the answers on this, and indeed in these Sunday videos I never claim to have all the answers. But I thought it was an interesting discussion point, so I thought I would start the discussion with my thoughts and my reflections on why I personally read disturbing books. And I'm going to be talking in particular here about disturbing fiction. So I tend to read disturbing fiction. I don't tend to read much true crime or non-fiction stuff, which can be disturbing. But I do find that disturbing fiction has an almost irresistible pull for me. And I read a fair bit of it. And that question that people were asking has definitely made me reflect on that. So taking things back to, their basics, I was thinking about stories and what stories are and what purpose stories serve for, humans and humanity. And I think there are two things in particular that stories do. And when you look at the history of stories, if you like, back to, kind of epic poems and even cave paintings and things like that, they are ways of conveying information. So they're ways for humans to disseminate information to wider groups. And they do that, they convey that information in a meaningful and memorable way. And the way they do that is by giving you characters that you can develop a relationship with. A fictional character in a book becomes, whilst you are reading that book, if the character is done well, if the writer's done a good job, that character becomes, like someone you feel for the duration of the book. And so the things that happen to that character's experiences and the learnings that character takes from those experiences are more meaningful and more memorable for you as a reader than they would be if someone just wrote a list of those things. You build up that emotional connection, and that means things sink in a bit more. And I think that's a really important thing about fiction, a thing that fiction does that non-fiction struggles to do. It gives meaning to the messages it's passing on, and therefore they sink in a bit more. So that's how I think stories work. That's what I think the purpose of stories is, as well as entertainment. So why would you read a disturbing book? Why would you read a book that makes you feel uncomfortable? In a way, it sounds even you'd have even less of a reason for reading a disturbing book if you think about the fact that you are, creating an emotional connection with the character in the book. Why would you want to read about horrible things, happening to an individual? If we think about horror fiction, and obviously there is an overlap between disturbing fiction and horror fiction. Not all disturbing fiction is horror, and certainly not all horror fiction is disturbing. But horror as a genre, so not just fiction, but video games and movies and comics and things like that, has a very solid place in our society. Horror stories have always been popular. A lot of fairy stories are in a way horror stories, and certainly the history of cinema, a lot of early cinema is horror. And what does horror do? Horror, if it's done well, frightens us. And I think that is something that we need. If you think about movies, you think about the first movies kids watch are often Disney movies, and Disney movies are often scary. Disney movies almost always have at least one scary scene in them. Even as an adult, the scenes in the first Toy Story film with the kind of mutated toys under Sid's bed, got to me. I found that scary even watching it as an adult. And I think it's important that we get scared. If you think about what happens to you when you get scared by a film or a book. You know, your heart beats a bit faster, you get that rush of adrenaline. And it's almost like your body is testing its fight or flight reflexes. And those are, you know, evolutionarily incredibly important reflexes that, you know, that all animals have. So I think we read horror fiction or watch horror films or TV shows or whatever in order to almost test our instincts, like you would test a smoke alarm every so often to make sure it still works. And we get a rush out of that. So it's the same reason why people ride roller coasters. It's exhilarating because you're doing it in a safe way, but you're allowing your body to prove that it can still do that thing that it needs to do. If something, you know, genuinely terrifying in the real world happens to you, your body will react in the way that it should. So everybody needs that. Everybody needs to be scared sometimes. Everybody needs to test their inner reflexes. But does everybody need to be disturbed? And I think the answer to that is no. I think not everybody needs to be disturbed. And also the people that do need to be disturbed don't need to be disturbed all the time. It would be pretty awful, wouldn't it, to be disturbed all the time? And when I was thinking about disturbing fiction and why I am drawn to it, I think in a similar way to horror, to being scared, being disturbed feels like almost an endurance thing. So you do it to test that you can get through it, but it's a very different feeling, isn't it? Being scared is almost like a physical feeling. You know, as I said, your heart beats faster, you get a rush of adrenaline and things like that. Whereas being disturbed is more of a psychological thing. It's a very hard thing to describe, doesn't it? It's being uncomfortable. It's things not feeling quite right, but it's not the same as being scared. It's not a physical reaction in the same way that being scared is. So why will we need to be disturbed? When I was thinking about people I know in real life, or people I've met, through years of reading and reviewing books, the people that tend to be into disturbing fiction are generally people who have had, their own problems in their lives. People who have struggled with mental health issues and things like this. And I'm not saying this as a complete generalisation. I'm saying this as, my experience is that people who are into disturbing fiction are more likely to have had, those kind of issues in the past. And I have myself. I've suffered from depression in the past. And I think that reading disturbing fiction is a way to test yourself, to experience things from the outside, so to experience traumatic, horrible things from the outside rather than from the inside. So rather than it being your own, pain and anguish, it's the character in the book, and you can close the book and walk away from it if you need to, or you can try and endure it. And I think by enduring it, by enduring the emotional pain of this character that you've made a connection with, you're proving to yourself that you can do it yourself, if you need to in the future. So as always, thank you very much for watching. Do let me know in the comments what you think. If you're a fan of disturbing books, let me know, why you think you are drawn to them. Let me know what you get out of them. But yeah, for me, it's definitely almost a feeling of comfort in knowing that I can confront these terrible things, and walk away from them, and maintain my equilibrium at the end of it. Okay, time for a random book from the shelves then. So I have today for you Through the Woods by Emily Carroll, which is a graphic novel, which is fantastically disturbing in places, and funnily enough plays with fairy tales. So I talked about fairy tales as being one of the original types of scary story at the start, and Through the Woods has kind of retellings of fairy tales in it, as well as other things, and is fantastically disturbing and beautifully illustrated. It's a really wonderful book if you like creepy stuff. So yeah, definitely recommend it. As always, thanks very much for watching. Hope you're safe and well out there. Hope you're reading good stuff, and I'll speak to you again very soon. Cheerio.